Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. While most of you will most likely be very busy testing the alpha version of the Final Stand DLC in the CTE, I have spent the day looking into something else. The flight physics of helicopters in Battlefield 4. I think that the scout and transport helicopters are quite fine. They could need a little bit of tweaking here and there, but overall they handle and feel quite nice. The only problem with them is that once you tilt them by 90 degrees, they crash. So while these two helicopters feel quite good, the attack helicopter is a different story. It feels nearly like a space shuttle. It is slow and clunky, as if it would be made out of concrete. It is not much fun to fly that attack helicopter. So what is the best way to compensate this downside? Well, it's quite obvious, isn't it? Give it more firepower! I'm sorry, I'm just messing with you. No, the attack helicopter does definitely not need more firepower. What it needs is to become more agile, because that will increase its chances of survival on the battlefield. Let's look back 9 years to Battlefield 2, where there were no such restrictions for pitch and roll for helicopters. But these were quite hard to fly. I remember that I was training for at least 10 hours in the LAN mode against bots before I even dared to fly on a public server. So if I would post this on the forum, then at this point the first people would write that this is not realistic. Helicopters can't perform such maneuvers. First of all, they can. And not just the Apache. I would also not use the words realistic and battlefield in the same sentence. Not even the old Battlefield games were simulations. A bit authenticity is always great, but most important is always the gameplay. So what could be done to make the helicopters, especially the attack helicopter in Battlefield 4, more interesting to fly and get it on a competitive level? One idea from the community was to simply have two different flight modes. The default one that works like now and an advanced one that works like the one in Battlefield 2. The idea would be that you can simply enter the gameplay options and then select which flight model you want to use. But I don't think that this suggestion has a realistic chance to get done for a game, well, as old as Battlefield 4. What seems to have better chances is to find a balance between the flight physics of Battlefield 2 and the one of Battlefield 4. Means that you get a better maneuverability and lose the pitch and roll restrictions, while not making it too complex to control. But can this even be done in Battlefield 4? Is that possible with the existing physics engine? As I've said many times before, we have a lot of very smart people in the Battlefield community. And these smart people have in fact found a way to make this work. If I would say that you only need to change a few numbers around, then this would be an understatement. But very simply put, this is what needs to be done to achieve what you can see here in this video. I can tell you, the helicopter feels really good when there are no pitch and roll limits. So when you reach the 90-degree angle, you no longer get stuck. This means that pilots finally have a chance to recover their helicopter when they get flipped to the side. By removing these restrictions and tweaking a few other values, you greatly increase the amount of possible flight maneuvers. But don't be fooled, some of these more advanced maneuvers are not that easy to pull off. I did crash a lot today until I got the hang of it. The beauty of these changes is that if you don't want to pull off such maneuvers, then you can just fly the helicopter as usual. With the changes it does not become much harder to fly. I tested this by having my brother first fly on the test range with the normal values, and then with the changed ones. He adapted pretty quickly, and he normally never flies a helicopter. Not in Battlefield 2, not in Battlefield 4, he's always my gunner. So that's the attack helicopter. How about the scout and the transport helicopters? I think that these are in general quite fine the way they are. but the only problem they have is that they still get stuck on the 90-degree angle and you crash. That should definitely be removed. But removing that restriction also means to have the helicopter be able to do rolls and loopings. And I think that this should be only possible with the attack helicopter. But maybe it is possible to set the speed at which the scout and transport helicopter roll to a value where they will lose so much altitude that it is just not a maneuver that you will actually do in these helicopters. The main point is to get rid of the 90-degree angle restriction. Some people might say now that the ISLA will never do these changes. While I don't know if the public version of Battlefield 4 will ever see that altered flight physics for helicopters, I am quite optimistic that we will be able to test this in the community test environment, because this is what we have it for. So what do you think? Do you like what I showed you here? What kind of ideas do you have to make the helicopters more interesting and competitive, but also more fun to play? So don't say remove them. You can be sure that I will let you know if there is any news about such changes to get included in the CTE. So if you want to know first, then you might want to consider to hit the subscribe button, and I might see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris, and this was Battle Nonsense.